Welcome back to Shinky Nation. Today we have an exclusive interview with Bert Beeckman, project lead at Forgotten Empires, and very excited to learn more about the African Royals DLC that is coming to Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition on August the 2nd. Bert, good afternoon. Good morning to me. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I've got a ton of questions I want to ask you, and we'll try to keep it as brief as possible. For me, I've been playing the game since it launched back in I think it was 2008 on my dad's computer. I remember playing the original demo, and there weren't many demos of games back then. And it was like British versus I think Spanish on New England versus the computer, and I played that to death. And me and my brother took turns. So to say that I've been playing Age of Empires 3 for a long time would be an understatement. I don't know if that's the case for you, but it's definitely a game that's meant a lot for me from a kid into being an adult, and it's super exciting to get to talk to you today about this new content.
Yeah, it's actually it's interesting because I have a very similar story. It was not with the demo, but our local library had a copy of Age of Empires 3, and I think I permanently rented it from the library for like a year and just play it. You kind of probably remember like the
Yeah,
ESO code to play online,
yeah,
but because it was from the library, somebody else had used it, so I was stuck playing single player, but I had a great time.
yeah.
Uh, just renting that over and over.
Yeah, it's awesome. So let's just dive right into it. With my first question was, with so many new civilizations, or rather civilizations from around the world to choose from, and then narrowing it down to the continent of Africa, how did the team go to the drawing board and decide on, okay, how are we going to make two new civs to bring into a game that's over a decade old? What was the process like for that?
So yeah, first thing we wanted to make sure that we had the right setting. We were so convinced that we wanted to go to Africa. We've been wanting to do that for a long, long time. So that was pretty decided. We've been doing something very similar on Age of Empires 2 as well, where we kind of jumped around continents. And it was about time that Africa, such a massive continent with such huge culture, was just never touched in Age of Empires 3 at all. So we really, really wanted to go there. And at that point, it was like, okay, we have Africa, a continent. Where do we start? And what we did was we just literally went to a drawing board and just a lot of pictures. Like, hey, this is something cool from Africa. This is Ethiopia. This is medieval Nigeria. This is medieval Benin. This is medieval Ghana. Not medieval, a bit later.
Yeah.
Post-medieval. Africa. And it was very interesting to look at that and just put that all together. And at that point, you just see, okay, what are areas that are, well, not only interesting visually, but history to them. A history that also fits the rest of the game. What are some interactions that they had with other civilizations in the game? Because that makes it interesting as well. If you make civilization of an island nation that has never really been in touch with anything else in the game, well, that's maybe not as interesting to do. But if you had a nation that is connected to a lot of the existing civilizations, well, that makes it interesting because then you have the battles you can tell, the stories that you can tell, the cards that you can send can have a connection to the existing civilizations. All these things make it interesting.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how we ended up with Ethiopia and Hausa. Ethiopia was very interesting because, well, many reasons. I could just fill a whole chat on why Ethiopia is interesting. But I think the main thing that stood out was that they were one of the few nations in Africa that kind of withstood colonialism throughout the scramble of Africa. They managed to keep their own culture. They managed to keep their own customs mostly alive. I think only towards the end of the scramble for Africa, Italy kind of came over and did some things there. But most of the time, they managed to keep their independence. And that was such an interesting story to tell in the era of colonialism, which is still a big part of Age of Empires 3, that they were able to resist that. And the Hausa was a different story. I mean, Ethiopia was one of the only ones that withstood colonialism, but Hausa were interesting because there was just so much happening there. I don't even know where to start, but it was basically a group of warring Hausa kingdoms that got together into the Hausa Federation, Hausa Nation. And there's just so much going on there in Western Africa that we just wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I keep hearing that theme of saying, there's a story we wanted to tell. I heard that also in some of the Age of Empires 4 trailers, and I think it's really cool. I think a lot of the players, enjoy that when getting to dig into these civilizations. And speaking of, you mentioned the two new civilizations, the Hausa and Ethiopia. Could you give us a brief overview of what to expect from these civs? I know they're quite intricate, and we could probably talk for a long time about it, but maybe just kind of a bird's eye view, what to expect out of these two civilizations for a new player looking into the African Royals DLC.
The biggest new thing I would say is an additional resource for the African civilizations. So they have an influence resource. That's actually a physical resource. It's not some kind of esoterical resource that is kind of around there. It's a physical thing, represented with cowrie shells. Cowrie shells were a currency that was used in large parts of Africa during the era or the time frame of Age of Empires 3. It was basically a payment. Currency that
I was actually trying to Google these shells yesterday and try to figure out what the picture was. A few other players were kind of wondering, like, what are these shells specifically? Yes. So that's good for you to mention.
So they're shells. You can ship them to your home city as well. You can gather from them. There's not like shells that you can naturally find on the map, but it is a currency. Mm-hmm. And with that currency, you basically buy influence. The richer you are, the more influence you have. And that influence you can exert on allies. You can go to native posts, but you can also, with the new upgrade system, say like, hey, I want an ally with, let's say, the Yoruba. And then you can, with influence, buy Yoruba mercenaries, natives, technologies, and like that, expand your empire outside of the 4 standard resources. And then secondly, I think another big thing is livestock market. So we've kind of made a new building there that combines herdables and livestock, in the market, livestock herdables and the market into one. And what you can do with the livestock market is you can task your animals on there. They will be grazing, they will be fattening, as they always do. You can then decide to eat them. You can decide to leave them there, in which case they grant you influence, because having a big herd of animals shows your wealth. Yeah. So that's one of the ways to gather influence. But you can also say like, hey, I want to trade this. I have a fully fattened cow. Instead of just eating it up and getting all my food really quick, can I just exchange that for gold or food? So that's another way to really change, especially the early game, for those civilizations.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed there is some a lot of unique builds you can do right out of the gate, just be around that trading at the market, whether it's not chopping any wood and just buying wood, or your gold for age up, or what it might be. My head's been spinning with the different things you can do already. So I think it's a really cool mechanic. And then specifically, these two civilizations, what are some of the highlights, some of the uniqueness that we're going to see, whether it's units or play styles, in your opinion?
Whoa, where to start? Let's start with the Hausa, right?
Yeah.
Hausa are definitely a cavalry civ. If you like to play with cavalry, you will love to play the Hausa. It's their cavalry just feels so smooth. It's so easy to just. They have a unit called the Raider. It's a very weak kind of cavalry, but it is a raider and it excels at that. It's quite good at taking down buildings, taking down villagers. They're very, very squishy, so if you run into just one pike, you're probably screwed. But you can do some good things with it. And then we also have the Lifidi Knight. These guys just look awesome. I think that was one of the main reasons that we wanted to go to Hausa initially. We found pictures of the Lifidi Knights, which are the very ornate. It almost looked like a medieval knight. That's almost what it looks like. And it looks so cool, and we're like, we want to put that in the game. And they're kind of a heavy cavalry. They don't have a lot of damage output, but they have a lot of resistance towards other units. So they're tricky to play with, but also tricky to take down. So I'm actually curious to see how they will find their place.
Yeah, a good tank unit.
It's a good tank unit, yes. but at the same time, yeah, it's because of the whole calculation, right? Like so many resistance, so much HP, and then so little attack. So sometimes I try to snap cannons with them, and I'm like, no, that didn't really work because I have such a low attack. So yeah, interesting thing to figure out with Hausa cavalry there.
Yeah. And then looking over, I guess, is for Ethiopia, what are some of the unique units that really stand out for them?
Ooh, Ethiopia is interesting because, well, I can just say some of my personal favorites because there's just so much
Yeah.
going on there. So both the civilizations, they start with a new explorer, the Ras and the Emir. The Ras is the Ethiopian one, and they're basically a mounted explorer. They're on horseback. They kind of ride around the map, and their ability to get treasures is not like the usual case shot or sharpshooting ability. They have a chaos ability, and what they can do is they can go to heavily guarded treasures very early in the game, and then cast the chaos ability. And then all the treasure guardians will start fighting each other. So it's very possible to have your first treasure be something that's guarded by 4 or 5 wolves, and take it relatively easily, as early in the game as in the exploration age. You can the discovery age. You can already try and get those treasures. And then one of my favorite things, because it kind of segues into this, there is this card, and I haven't really figured out how to use it yet, but I think it will see some play in team games at least. Ethiopians can send a card to upgrade their Ras, their starting explorer. And what it does is that for all the XP that it gathers, but not just the explorer, all your units through fighting, they gather XP. And that XP cost is then subtracted from your next age up.
Oh
So you
boy.
can say like, hey, I'm fighting a lot here. I've gained, let's say, 200 XP. Now my next age up is going to cost 200 less food and 200 less gold. And I'd love to say that play out. I don't know how it will work yet, but I think that's one of those interesting, weird little quirks from the Ethiopians that I'd love to see.
I feel like that could be really useful for getting into maybe Imperial super late game when you're in a deadlock in age 4 sometimes. It's sometimes really hard to make that jump, especially in a 1v1. I wonder how much cheaper that could end up making it.
I had it yesterday. I played a super long game. It was just against AI, but I was just playing around with things and just messing. And at some point I was like, wait, what? My Imperial is 1,300 gold and 1,300 food. How the hell did that happen? And then I just realized, oh, wow, that card actually is a lot better than I thought it would be. So yeah, curious how it will figure out, how that will play out.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that's also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
One thing I also find interesting about both civilizations is how they interact with native civilization. We already kind of spoke about it, like you have this influence that you can buy natives with. But what's very interesting is that if you play as an African civ, the native civilizations automatically shadow tag. So if you go to the next age, you will automatically get their upgrade. And because they cost this different kind of resource, you can kind of go all in on that, get your cheaper age up with the Ethiopians, if you send the card, of course.
Yeah.
And then kind of go to the Imperial quite quickly and get those legendary native units out there. And it's just so much fun. I'm not saying it's viable, but it's just fun.
Yeah, I already noticed that there seems to be a lot of units to choose from. I was playing around trying to figure out what the standard, go-to comp might be, and I think it might take quite some time, or might be very unique to individual players. And I know that I've thought a lot of times the natives on a lot of these maps have been underutilized at times, or just not viable to bring in the game. So I would love to see maybe those units to be something that we see in a regular game that could bring into play, or being able to pick up an early native post with selling some of the cattle at the market and bringing those in. So I think it's definitely a lot of opportunity with those. Do you have, I know you've tested it, quite a bit and played around a little bit. Do you have an opinion? What do you think is the standard army you like to use, let's just say in age 2, with maybe Ethiopia or the Hausa? Do you have something that you tend to prefer at the moment?
At the moment, I personally love to play with, okay, as the Hausa, I love to play with Magidi and Raiders. So Magidi is kind of a very heavy skirmisher that you can train in the palace. And
Yeah.
palace is kind of like an H2 fortress that you can build, and you can try Magidi from there. I would kind of say they resemble a bit like Jaegers.
Yeah.
So of course they're fun to play with. Jaegers are fun to play with as well. And combining that with these very squeaky cavalry is really fun. And then the last thing you can do is you can just add a native to that through your age up or through a native post. Usually just through an age up, like you age up with your Sudanese or something, and you get some dervishes to play with. And it's a really good complement for your army. And I think that's what makes it nice as well. Like you age up, you get your shipment of natives. And let's say it's a very strong skirmisher unit. Well, then you don't need to make your skirmisher unit anymore. You have your army complement is already there.
It's good to hear. I've actually, I think, been using those 2 unit comps kind of together, and with those knights you mentioned earlier. So now I feel like maybe I'm moving in the right direction, but I have to keep exploring. And then, what about for Ethiopia? Is there a comp you really like to use?
Ethiopia is difficult because they have definitely more interesting or more variety in their early game compositions, I believe. I still haven't figured them out fully. I've seen play with the Kaskenya, which is kind of like their musketeer, kind of. And then the Neftenia, which is kind of their skirmisher. And I kind of still don't know. I love to play with Neftenias. They're really fun. I love to play, well, complementing them with natives. I always try to do that. But I still haven't figured them completely out. But once you get to the, because we're talking about H2 now, once you get to the third age, and especially the fourth age, there is the Sebastopol Mortar, which is probably the biggest mortar in the game.
I know that got people excited in the trailer, seeing that giant mortar there. It's just awesome.
Yeah. It's a mortar that you don't have to pack and unpack, so that's very convenient. Yeah. It is very slow in return, though, so please send your mortar carefully, because he goes very, very slowly. And then he has 2 modes. He has, how should I say it, high damage, small area, where he just shells a smaller area, or you can say I spread it out on a bigger area. The splash effect is larger. But just the amount of damage it does and the amount of splash it gets, I think it's higher than any other artillery piece in the game right now. It's very expensive to train, very difficult to get, but if you get a shot of that guy, you're good.
Yeah.
So that's just fun. Like as soon as you get to H3, you can ship one. You can't create them yet, but you can ship one, and that just pummels most of the H2 units that are on the field at that point.
Well, I know there's tons of new units to choose from, and I'm sure the players will have a great time just diving into all the different combinations. We could probably talk about it all day, but we won't right now. I had my next question for you, and this is something that's definitely been on the back of my mind as I have been watching some of the trailers and then getting to play a little bit of the game. Is I'm curious, as a project lead, what influences did you guys use from other Age games in the franchise when going in to design this DLC? If any, were you looking at Age of Mythology, looking forward towards Age of Empires 4? I know you're wearing Age of Empires 2 shirt, and I know you a lot of experience with all those different games. Were there any specific influences that you purposely, maybe even sometimes tried to bring into this game?
So if we look at the team, most of the team have been playing Age of Empires since H1. So they went from H1 to 3 Mythology. They played all of it, including the design team. We don't specifically go and say like, hey, this is something that is cool in Age of Mythology, let's bring it over. What we usually do is we just start looking at the historical designs of a unit, where we can say like, hey, we have, let's say the mortar again, right? And the mortar has this massive splash damage. And then we can say, okay, how does splash damage work in other games? How does it work in H2? How does it work in H3? How does it work in Mythology? They all work kind of different, similar but also different. And then you need to figure out, okay, what works here? So it's more about, okay, let's look at how it works in other games. does it work in other games? And then maybe we can, learn from that, or just say like, hey, that's a mechanic that works. I think your question actually stems from, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it kind of stems from the griot unit.
Yeah, I saw. I really, and maybe it's just because for me, I played a ton of Age of Mythology. I saw a lot of things. I was like, oh my gosh, that's just like that unit in Age of Mythology, and that's like that. And I was like, was it purposeful? Purposeful? Was it coincidence, or like you said, they've been playing from Age 1? Maybe it's just it's so much into all the designers' kind of like thoughts about the game.
It's one of the so the griot is a unit that you can kind of task to empower buildings. So if you
Yeah.
have a griot, you can train it for the Hausa, you can task it, create it from the university, and then you can task it on, let's say, your town center, and then your town center works a bit faster. That is, of course, a mechanic that we know from the pharaoh in Age of Mythology. So we know it works, and that's kind of the extent of that. When we looked at what is a griot historically, we were like, okay, they're storytellers. Okay, how do we put that in the game? Because it was such an interesting concept that is actually still alive today. We still have these griots going around Western Africa and telling the stories and their history. That's why Western Africa has such a strong oral tradition and less of a written tradition, because of this griot culture. And we really wanted to get it in the game and didn't really know how. And that was one of the things that we were like, okay, it empowers communities. Can it just empower buildings? That's sometimes it's as simple as that. We start from history, we work from there. We see it works in other games. So yeah, why not?
Yeah. And then another question I really had was, you have these two new civilizations with new mechanics, new buildings, new units. I know it's easy probably to get in a vacuum and just really be focused on those at times, probably when you're in the drawing board and design. How do you take these new civilizations and, when you're designing those, and make sure they're going to seamlessly fit in with the balance of these civs that have been in the game for a decade, and make them feel like they should have always been there for a new player? That has to be a crazy challenge. It's easy to dream up new units and new ideas, but what's the process of that?
So I mean, all credit to the excellent design team, who have so much experience in the community as well. Sometimes people wonder, like, hey, what happened to Interjection? Like, he was always so active on YouTube, and then he kind of disappeared. Well, that's because he's one of the lead designers on this, and he's been working most of the civilization, the new civilizations, alongside. His nickname in the community is Tilanus, from the Napoleon era mod. So we have people who have such a large experience in not only modding Age of Empires, but also casting Age of Empires, competitive scene, how you play it on a high level. And that really helps us in understanding, okay, how does a new design fit in? How can we calculate that it fits in? And how do we make sure that it stacks up against the existing units as well? Now, that's one part, right? Like the experience helps us in establishing. And then the civilization comes out, and it's perfectly possible that completely broken things or completely unbalanced things are found on day one. That's completely possible. I got a tweet yesterday from somebody saying, like, hey, I found an exploit in Age of Mythology where I could make a catapult shoot twice as fast as it should be. And I was like, well, that's something that has been in the game for 20 years, and now all of a sudden is discovered. Those are things that happen. And I think it was it 2 weeks ago? I saw a video of Aussie Drongo, and he was kind of casting matches with this meta. I'm calling it meta, but it was really just wonky, where somebody stayed into H1 as British.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
I'm very familiar with that. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, what the hell? Like, this is a mechanic that's been in the game for so long, and then on quite a high level, somebody managed to break that meta, and stay in the first stage for 9 freaking minutes before attacking, and still winning the game. And then whenever we release a new civilization, we're very, very aware that whatever we make, people will find a way to break it. Maybe not now, maybe in a week, maybe in just a few days, maybe in a few hours, or maybe in 10 years. Like all of that is possible. But I think the most important thing there is also that we have the ability to update those things. If we see that something is broken, we can patch it. If we see that or feel that the tactic is just not working out, it's not gelling well with the rest of the game, we can update it. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And then my next question was, we talked a little bit about balance and these new civs. I know when USA came out, there were some balance changes to some of the existing civs. I know my beloved Lakota got a captured mortar. Are there any big balance changes coming out with this DLC being launched for the existing civs, or any new mechanics that maybe they might be getting? And I'm sure people are very curious to know specifically if there's any changes with the Sweden balance.
Yes, Sweden has some balance changes, absolutely. Also, very important to know for the new civilizations, there are no house booming civilizations. Just for everybody's sanity.
Yeah, we should start the video with that clip and people will be like, bye.
I like it. I like it. Yes, there are balance changes. That is something that's going to continue to come out. We have some changes to Sweden. I think we made some changes to Torps, to Svei Lifeguards, to Corollians. So yes, we are aware of that. We constantly monitor the existing civilizations. We try to make adjustments. What we did with the Lakota and the captured mortar, that was, it was something that was obviously missing. Lakota really lacked that long-range siege, and really made them very, well, I'm not going to say impossible to play on treaty, but it was certainly not a favorite civilization for treaty players. And also just in the late game, it was just difficult to break some situations up as Lakota. We didn't have any specific gaps that we wanted to fill this time around, but we do have new mercenaries, new natives that all the civilizations, of course, can play with. Also, if you play against AI, like I just played the game against, I think it's Swedish AI, and he was making some of the new mercenaries and natives on the new maps. So there's always like this little bit of novelty to all the civilizations with new content.
I think that with that last part, let's lead into the next question. As I know, there's 5 new native civilizations or tribes that you can ally with. What can you tell us, maybe a little bit of an overview about some of those?
Yes. So this actually also ties in with the very first question you asked, like, hey, how did you look at civilizations? And we made this massive list of like, these are all candidates. And then basically most of those candidates we turned into minor civilizations. Like, okay, maybe Ethiopians are more interesting than Somali to turn into a major civ, but Somalia was there and they had an influence on the course of history. Let's make Somalia a minor civ. And I think we have 5. Yeah, we have 5 of them. Somalia, Sudanese, Yoruba, I think, Akan, and the Berbers. The Berbers we've seen before. They were sneakily teased in an historical battle as the Barbary state, but we've kind of expanded on that as well. So yeah, if you play the new the new maps, you will find the new minor civilizations as well. But the coolest thing I think about minor civilizations is that they tie in with the new age-up system. So even if you are, let's say you're playing as the Hausa, you're playing on New England, in the second age, you can, one of the age-up options is say, hey, I want to ally with the Berbers. And what you get then is you get the Berber camel, the Berber nomads as units in your native trading post. And you also get some unique Berber upgrades in your university. Not all of them, so there is still absolutely a benefit to get the Berber trading post going, if that's available to you. But you get a snippet of that if you age up as the Berbers.
Yeah.
So it's definitely tied in.
That's very cool. I'm very jealous when I hear you pronounce some of these names. I know you spent a lot of times learning about some of these, through the design process, and I'm looking at them for the very first time trying to decide, what is this unit called? Or I know there's units I've been calling probably the wrong thing for like 10 years. So I feel like we're going to need like an Age of Empires, like official pronunciation guide to help kind of that historical aspect of learning new things. Like it's always fun. I know I'm going to Google all the time. Like, was a Gatling camel a real unit in real life? And I'm like looking these things up. So, it's nice to get to hear some of that coming from you. And then you mentioned a little bit about the maps there, as we talked about the new natives. I know there's 15 new maps, and I'm not even sure. I said in my last YouTube video, it was something I knew I wanted, what I'm super excited about. What can you tell us about all of these new maps?
All right. So yeah, there's a lot of new maps in there. We kind of took two approaches to the maps, right? Like one is, okay, let's see what the community likes and what the community has been doing for a long time. The community has a lot of custom-made maps. Let's look at some of those. Let's see what's popular. Let's see what works. And let's make those official maps. Let's turn those into official maps. Let's dress those up in a proper African atmosphere. And let's add some new snippets to them as well. And then we also made some brand new maps that are never seen before. And then also like mixes of, concepts that we know that work, and then new things. I think one of the most fun concepts that's, at least personally for me, is that some of the maps have a trading post that just starts right next to your base. So if you want to say like, because that's one of the big difficulties with trading posts, right? Like they're in the middle of the map. You can't defend it. The battle needs to happen there, and it can't happen anywhere else. But if you say like, hey, I want to play defensive with these natives, on some maps you can. And that is one of the things that I really would like to see if that actually works out for players. But yeah, 15 maps, new natives, new animals, new trees. Curious to see what people come up with.
I thought the coolest thing that I saw was the water trading post with the actual, like, I don't know if it's a caravel going through instead of the, like, the horse and carriage. I thought that was really cool. I really liked that addition.
It's a fun little thing, right? Like it's practically the same thing as a normal trading post. You get your resources, you build a TP on it. The guy, well, I say the guy passes by, but the boat passes by.
Yeah.
Maybe some experience or some influence. But it just looks cool.
Yeah.
I'm very happy. I'm very happy with that.
Someday I need to get you guys to add in this new mechanic. I think would be really cool if when the trading post passes and hits your army, you take splash damage, because the train just can run through your army. I think, maybe a little bit of damage when the train hits your troops might be appropriate, maybe for the next patch, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's it. It would be interesting for sure.
I was really
operation or something.
I was really excited when I saw the Shotgun Messengers card for the United States, and I was like, "Oh, my trade post is going to shoot. Let's see what this does." And I know I had fun experimenting with that for the last DLC. And then I know we talked a little bit about the stories and the history lessons of Age of Empires 3 and the African Royals. But what can you tell us? I know there are 3 new historical battles that I really don't know a whole lot about yet. What do you want to tell the viewers about that?
Yeah, so we have 2 new historical battles. One is about the Hausa, one is about Ethiopia, and one is actually about Moroccans. The Moroccans are not a civilization; they are rather like a mini custom civilization that we just made for this mission. But it was just an interesting story to tell, and was about beating back the Portuguese invaders from Morocco at the time. And it was just an interesting story to tell, and kind of ties into what we said at the very beginning, right? Like, we want to tell a story when we had the new civilization. And even though we have the battles now, and that was part of that, like, hey, this is an interesting battle. This is a battle that we want to zoom into. It's what story we want to tell. And yeah, that's basically what you will find in the battles. What's also fun, and this is really just a personal thing, but I've played these battles so many times, not because I have to test them, but because I like them.
Yeah.
They're just fun. Like, I can replay them and I can say like, okay, now I want to try and beat them with just making natives, or now I want to try and beat them with just artillery. And it's fun because it's not like this guided experience where like, okay, now I need to go from point A to B and complete an objective. No, you can do whatever the hell you want. And I love that. It's a personal thing, but just the fact that, in weekends I will be playing this because I like it, I think is just fun.
Yeah, well, I think for me, like, that's what really drew me into the RTS genre in general. Back when many of the games that I was playing as a child were very story driven. Were not that some of these games don't have story mode, but like the fact that in RTS there's so many different ways you could complete a mission, and then, of course in multiplayer, just like millions of possibilities of unit combinations and strategies and eco versus rush and all of that is like always been something that made me super excited about RTS games. And of course, Age of Empires. And you just mentioned, I know you mentioned throughout that you do play the game, but what has it been like? You spend, I'm assuming, all day and probably all night thinking about and working on Age of Empires, and then you say you're going home and maybe playing that game. What's it like playing a game that you're working on all the time, and that experience?
It is really interesting because you also learn a lot about how people play the game that you're working on.
Mm-hmm.
When Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition came out, I had never played multiplayer before, outside with like some family and friends, but I've never ventured into the real multiplayer. And now I was like, okay, the game is freshly released again. There's going to be so many people that have never played before. I want to join that journey. I want to
Mm-hmm.
join them in learning the game. And that was so interesting because now, I mean, I'm still not a very good player. That's I'm playing ranked and I'm having a lot of fun. I think I'm like somewhere top 2000s on team game and 1v1, which is not bad, but not that great either. And I just love to discover on how the game is played, and I learned so much. Uh, that's yeah, things I just didn't know, um, and also just seeing how people play the game. If you go to unranked, that's really eye-opening for me. Like if you go to ranked, like you have the meta, right? And we see
Mm-hmm.
what we all see on YouTube and you see how people play. But then you go to unranked, and then there's like this guy who says like, okay, I want to do free for all on a large map with 40 minutes no rush. And I joined one of those games, and it was a completely different experience. Like people
Yeah.
were just chatting to each other. People were like, hey, no, don't attack me. I'm just doing my thing here. And people are like, okay, fine, I'll just attack the next dude. And it was just such a laid back atmosphere that is also part of the Age of Empires community. And I found that so eye opening. And it's like we want to make sure that these people are having a good time as well. And that's also why I think the card system in H3 is so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like so many cards are probably uh, not completely meta or will never find a place in the meta.
Mm-hmm.
But for other ways of playing the game, these cards can be so much fun. Like
Yeah.
we have the poker card in Age of Empires, sorry, for the United States Civilization, where you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of send like 13 randomly generated saloon dudes.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a place in the meta for that, but it's a fun card. And there's definitely a part of the community that just loves to send that and just make a saloon army
Yeah.
or a poker army, whatever you want to call it.
It's really refreshing to
Um,
hear that you guys like. Obviously, there's the competitive side of things. I know I tend to play a lot more of the competitive, but that you have the casual gamer in mind as well. With even some of these cards, because I know there's been times that I look at a card, I'm like, why is this even in here? I would never send this, but yeah, like I'm not thinking about someone playing a free for all and maybe making alliances or whatever the heck they might be doing. So it's kind of good to hear that.
it is very interesting. And I think what's also interesting is that when you, oh, I think I lost my train of thought here.
That's
Okay,
fine.
I'll find it back later. Sorry.
um, and I think as far as the questions go, the next one I have kind of speed around of some easy slash fun questions for you as a player. So I hope you're ready. The first question I have for you is I know you play a little bit outside of out of your work. What is your biggest achievement as a player? What would you say would be one of your biggest achievements?
My biggest achievement as a player, Jesus, that's difficult. I mean, one of it might be a small personal highlight, but
Yeah.
I like to play Treaty. And when the USA came out, I had an unfair advantage because I was already home city level 90
Yeah.
because I've been playing so much and experimenting with it. And I wandered into a room with a lot of like top treaty players, and I could hold up just because they were still discovering the civilization and I of course knew it already. So, but that was just so much fun. Like I will never have a chance to ever play with these guys again because they will just wipe the floor with me. But that was just so much fun.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think I could share with that. Playing a little bit of the African Royals, I beat Minimolt for the first time ever yesterday, and I was in voice chat with them, and I had been playing for like I think 6 or 8 hours before it was his first round ever, and I was like, I think this is probably the only time I will ever beat you in a game, but it was fun.
exactly like it. It's never gonna happen again, but it felt amazing.
And then if you had to choose one of the new civilizations to main, which one would you choose today and why?
So I think definitely Hausa, just because I like to play with cavalry.
Yeah.
Um, and I think Ethiopia are definitely something that I want to see what high level players come up with. I
Hmm.
think it's a more difficult civilization to play with, but it has so much going on that I just want to see crazy combinations being pulled off. So my main is definitely Hausa.
Yeah. I think for me, just like having played so much Lakota and so much cavalry based kind of play style, naturally that's the first civ that's kind of caught my eye. So I'll be learning more about that civ very quickly here. And then a few fun questions for you. What's the chance that you could remove the unit limit for Tashunki Prowlers?
Ooh, I would have to ask this the balance team.
Then I was hoping you'd be like, yeah, we'll just do that today.
Yeah, I'm not gonna make any balance calls here because I know I'm not good enough of a player to make those calls. I'm on a level where I knew that Sweden was sometimes annoying to play with, but to answer a question like that,
Yeah.
it's a bit out of my league. So
Yeah, my next question is when would Sweden's reign of terror on the ladder finally be ended? It sounds like you've already mentioned a little about the mountains before. Maybe that'll be the case, but we'll see. And then my last question was going to be, how do I get you to play a 2v2 with me on stream?
if you find somebody who is also not that great to play against us, I'll happily join you. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
love playing.
I love playing H3. I actually play. I try to play every day. Usually in the downtime, so I'm usually paired up with Chinese players and Australian players. But I try to play a game every day. So it might not reflect in my skill level every time, but yeah, I love to play. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for this exclusive look at the African Royals content, which is going to be releasing here on August the 2nd. And really enjoy getting to learn more about what goes on and the design and the behind the scenes. And hopefully I'll be seeing you on the ladder.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Hey guys, if you have not already, head on over to twitch.tv/FitzBro and hit that follow button to catch my next gaming live stream. I'll see you there.